Question. Did Legoshi lose to Desire? What would have happened if Zoe hadn't shown up? Is the fact that Legoshi is rejecting his shadow good or bad? Hi, hello, and welcome to the video. My name is Danahan, and this is Overthinking Media, where we review all things anime, gaming, cinematic, and entertaining with an intent to start a discussion. Where today, we're continuing our look at Legoshi's shadow, what it symbolizes, and why the scene is so fundamentally important. If you haven't seen the previous episode yet, I recommend watching it. This is kind of part 2 to this scene, but in this part, we're looking at the symbolism of the scene. Legoshi's shadow first appears as a small voice, a gentle thing in the distance. I don't believe Legoshi's shadow can be described as an addiction. Instead, I would refer to it as a desire. And I think we've all been there at one point or another, where that little voice in the back of your head tries to convince you to give in to that little desire you want. Perhaps it's buying junk food. Perhaps it's giving into that bad habit. Perhaps it's slacking off and not doing your work. Perhaps it's having that cheat day in your diet. Perhaps it's staying in bed instead of going to the gym. Perhaps it's messaging your ex. Perhaps it's buying that thing you don't really need, but ooh, shiny and pretty. Everyone has that little voice in the back of their head. Everyone has that little voice of desire. And every so often, it pops a little head up to say, hey, you should listen to me. However, once it has popped its head up, sometimes it's easy to ignore. Other times, not so much. Which is the case in Legoshi's situation. Even when desire is child size, it's still framed from behind it, where its leg takes up most of the shot, making it appear far more imposing than it actually is. As we can see, when the hands try to push Legoshi's arm tighter around Haru, it's a small thing, it's tiny, its hands are literally small on his arm, trying to push his arm deeper in. But the next scene, it's zoomed in close to Desire's face. It's slowly pushing the camera into its eyes. In reality, Desire is still, I believe, the same size, because it's kind of complicated. Because by the next scene, it's the giant wolf entity. So maybe not. Who knows? But in this scene, I believe Desire is still the child-sized size. It's just the camera has slowly pushed in to get closer. So this entity that is the same size, if you bring the camera in, suddenly I seem bigger, even though in reality, I'm just the same size. However, the more Legoshi tries to deny it, the larger it symbolically becomes. Symbolized by the fact that moments later, this child-sized relatively small thing that could be possibly ignored now has the size of a giant monstrous beast. Legoshi is trying his best to deny desire, but it's so large now, he's finding it so hard, to the point that it's almost impossible. Even though it may be something Legoshi doesn't actually want, the desire has taken over, and he thinks he wants to devour meat. And once he does devour meat, maybe he didn't want it, maybe he didn't, but once he has, he can't take that choice back. But hey, who knows? Legoshi's a carnivore. I can't really relate to how good that may taste. But Desire keeps pushing Legoshi towards taking a bite. He keeps trying to entice Legoshi to bite into Haru's flesh. The arms of Desire wrap around Legoshi, just like Legoshi is wrapped around Haru, slowly enclosing around him, taking over control of his body. Evident by the fact that Legoshi's eyes are now glowing red, Desire has taken over. Legoshi can't bite anymore. He can't resist that delicious desire of eating. Legoshi has given into his carnivore nature. Legoshi is going to devour Haru. If Zoe hadn't shown up and interrupted him by calling his name, Legoshi would have devoured Haru. He would have consumed meat. He would have killed another person. But in this moment of confusion, Haru takes a chance to flee and run. However, not without cutting herself up on Legoshi's claws, resulting in a large blood red stain on her fur as she does. Speaking of colours, let's talk about the use of colours, shall we? The use of colour in this scene is interesting. Starting at the actual opening of the scene, the entire scene is bathed in darkness, despite the fact that this scene is brightly lit enough to be able to see surrounding areas, as evidenced by the next scene and the prior scene. The scene is also shot in highly desaturated and muted colours, which helps exemplify any colours that are used in the scene, such as the red, a colour primarily associated with danger, and in the case of this series, carnivores. There's the gentle glow of the red from the bottom of the screen that ever so subtly turns the scene red, present when Legoshi is internalizing his option. There's the faint glow of red on Legoshi's face as he's begging Desire to stop, as well as the waterfall and streetlights being shown as red in this scene, despite the fact that the lamps are actually more of a light yellowy orange and the waterfall is blue. But the most prominent use of red, I think, in the scene, outside of the actual use of red in a symbolic sense, is within Desire's body. You can literally see the red pulsing out of Desire's body from within his mouth and eyes. It is ignited inside his chest and it is glowing out of his body, as well as symbolically and metaphorically showing when desire takes over Legoshi's body by his eyes glowing red. As Legoshi begins to give in to desire, he tightens his grip around Haru's body, leading to the first real red we actually see in the scene, where it's actually red as opposed to a symbolic use of the colour, when his arm squeezes Haru, leading her to bleed. Unlike the rest of the scene up to this point, which have used soft or vibrant reds, the red of Haru's blood is the realistic dark red of blood, a sharp juxtaposition to the vibrant red of the other scene. Even the red within desire has a glow about it. It's soft, even though desire is not inherently a monster, but within the confines of the situation, desire is getting Legoshi to devour a living creature. Therefore, by the constructs of society, it's agreed upon as bad. However, whether desire is actually good or bad, that's an argument for another day and a massive video. Let's get back to Legoshi, shall we? The camera only lingers on the blood for a second though, before the camera changes the shot of Legoshi moving in for the bite. His eyes still glowing red, only returning to white once Zoe calls out his name and snaps him back to reality, preventing him from doing what he's about to do. This symbolically shows us that Legoshi is back to being Legoshi as opposed to the carnivore, as his eyes are no longer glowing red, which is also when all the colours in the scene subtly begin to return back to their natural saturation, albeit far less vibrant because it is the night time and colours are less vibrant at night because direct sunlight makes them vibrant, but definitely still far more saturated than it was a moment ago. As well as the powerful red streak along Haru's arm, as Legoshi's claws unintentionally slice up her flesh. The scene concludes with Haru running off in the distance, her aura still visible, still a soft, gentle pink, slowly fading and dissipating in the air. With the scene changing to the theatre, there isn't really much symbolism in this shot. The only thing really of note is that the scene is bathed in a blue light, which is the polar opposite of the red, showing that Legoshi is now on the side of humanity once again. The scene before uses the colour of red to help personify the concept of the carnivore or the beast, whereas this scene uses the colour of blue to help personify the side of humanity, the side Legoshi finds himself on in this scene. Oh yeah, as well as showing us that Louis has injured his leg. That's kind of an important moment in this scene and kind of has a overall big impact on the series, so let's focus on that for a second, shall we? However, what about when Legoshi is standing in the bathroom, literally washing the blood off of his hands, only to look into the mirror and see the reflection of the carnivore, of the beast, of the shadow, with different forms of the true form of a carnivore within the mirror, leaving Legoshi to smash. Perhaps this scene is about Legoshi rejecting who he naturally internally is. Perhaps it's symbolically or figuratively about Legoshi shattering the truth of who he is, or maybe, or even could be. Or perhaps it's denying a part of himself that, even though he doesn't want to admit exists, is a part of him. A lot like Shin Megami Tensei 4 and the characters and their shadows. Yeah. Moving on, but we're not even done with the symbolism yet. There's still so much more to discuss when it comes to what this scene tells us about the characters. This scene shows us that Legoshi is more than just a one-dimensional character, that he's more than a paragon of heroism that so many series present their main character as in other series. Legoshi is a character that is presented with flaws and imperfections. He is a deeply flawed character who is doing his best not to give in to those desires. Legoshi is a character that is presented with flaws and imperfection, including the social anxiety and depression, which, may I just remind you, was brought up in the first episode subtly and in the right way without pushing it in your face. It didn't go, hey look, Legoshi's got depression and anxiety. No, it just presented a character who has depression and anxiety in a realistic way, and the watcher go, oh, I think he might have anxiety and depression. It's amazing. God, Paru, you're awesome! The scene also shows us that there are hardships carnivores have to internally fight with in their lives just because of how they were born. Much more on that later in the series though, including internal fights they can't talk about, such as the desire to devour meat. And evidently, by the start of the first episode, is something that can be very easily lost again, to the point that Legoshi would have given into his desire and would have devoured Haru and would have killed a student had Zoe not shown up and snapped him out of it, unintentionally saving both Haru and Legoshi. Man, Zoe's the real goat of the series. Literally. Oh, wow. I didn't realise I wrote that. He is a goat, isn't he? Oh, puns. I lose a point for that one. Do I get a point or I lose a point? I don't know. Moving on. Then there's Louis. The theatre scene shows us that Louis is prideful and stubborn, brushing off an injury that is clearly more painful than he admits. Even so, it shows us that Louis is an inherently selfless individual, despite the front he puts on, instinctively running to save Zoe when he didn't have time to think about it. As for Haru, I don't think this scene directly tells us anything. Instead, the series shows us the fallout of this experience throughout the runtimes of the season. Similarly, on a surface level, this scene doesn't really tell us much about the large world of Beastars, but it does plant some ideas that throughout the series grow, including what it psychologically means for Legoshi to live with his actions of the previous night, which you can actually see in the lunchroom. And if you want to know about that, click on this video right here to watch it now. See ya!